Yo, it's your boy Mark Goodman, aka the voice box of the block. I'm back with another one. I'm super excited to be here, man. I got a new guest, man. He's coming all the way from Harlem. Billy Council. How's it going, brother?
My brother, thank you for having me, man. It's going amazing, man. Just pushing along and, trying to keep the good fight, to keep the good fight going, man. So everything is doing well. Thank you for having me.
No problem, man. Thank you for joining. I know this kind of last minute, man. I hit you on your email. I kind of rushed you, man. And for all the viewers in South Carolina who don't know who this man is, man, he is Billy Council, man. He's running for council in District 9 in Harlem, born and raised. I'm going to let him introduce himself because he can say more than I can. I'm just going to be a bystander or fly on the wall listening, man. So Billy, can you kind of tell these viewers who you are, how you feel about Harlem? First of all, because I've never been to New York. I've been to Virginia, DC, Maryland. I haven't got that far yet to get to New York. So in one word, when I say Harlem, what it is?
Amazing.
Man. Amazing.
Yeah, amazing. Right. You gotta think about Harlem. Harlem is the Mecca for Black people. Mm-hmm. Right. Harlem is the Mecca for the culture that we have, right? Harlem, when you think about Harlem, just think about the Apollo Theater and everyone who had to come through the Apollo Theater, right? So when you come to Harlem, Harlem is not a pit stop, right? You just don't come to Harlem to go to the Apollo. You understand the culture. You spend time getting to know the people, right? We set trends here, in Harlem. Like, so when you talk about, Harlem, you're talking about the Mecca for all Black people, and I know, Atlanta is the new spot. Yeah. However, Harlem has always been that place in New York City that everybody, usually hit when they come through, New York City.
Yeah, they call Atlanta baby New York now.
yeah, because everybody in Atlanta. I go to Atlanta and it's like I'm in Harlem.
Exactly.
It's like an old reunion again.
Exactly. So when I follow you a lot, and you always talk about you're a product of your environment, and so we're gonna go back a little bit. Tell some of the people about you before you got into this direction you're going. Tell some of my viewers about you as far as your upcoming you're bringing.
One of the things that I say is just like, I grew up, during that time where, the crack epidemic was heavy in Harlem, right? And especially in our communities, not just in Harlem, but just in the urban communities, right? Absolutely. And I was one of those guys who was a product of that, right? It's a true story. Like, my mom was a heroin addict. My mom was a drug. My dad was in the streets. I grew up the only boy, I had nothing but sisters. So, there was times that, I had to be the provider. I had to be the one to take the leadership role. My dad was, not in the house because, my mom and my dad were not together. But, I was the only boy. So, I found my outlet to the streets. The streets led me to doing things that I shouldn't have been doing in the streets. And then, I wound up getting shot 6 times in my building, left for dead, had to learn how to walk, eat, talk, use the bathroom, all of those things that I had to overcome. Right. So, and at that time growing up in our community, there was no guidance, no leadership. There was no mentors. So, I was one of those guys who was like, wasn't going to see 21, wasn't going to see 25, wasn't going to see 30. Right. And, I wound up, beating those odds. Right. So I always tell people it's not about what happened to me. I want to glorify the story of where I'm at now. Right. Because, what happened to me was destined to happen to me. Right. Like, I don't even regret it now. Right. And the reason why, because if I, maybe if I would have went a different direction, I probably wouldn't have made an impact in so many other people's lives as that I have done now. Right. So that's something that I always say, like, I don't regret the things that happened to me. Right. it took a long time for me to even get to this point to talk about me being shot, right? Because I never wanted to have that stigma of another Black man. This is a story, right? Either he's in jail or he's in the streets, right? So I always wanted to change the narrative on how we look at things and how people look at us, but most importantly, how we look at as Black men, how we look out of ourselves and say like the adversity that we come through, man, can put, push us to anywhere that we want to go. So I've always been focused on not what happened, but where I'm going and where I'm at now.
Absolutely. And I didn't want to too much dwell on the incident, but from a mental standpoint, because I just did a podcast about mental health, and you've been shot 6 times, and you've been in the product of your environment. How did you find your way mentally out of that space? Because like being shot 9 times, I'm assuming you was paranoid. I would be paranoid, and I've never been shot, but being in that space mentally, how did you work yourself out of that?
Well, to be honest with you, and we talk about mental health, and mental health is something that has been a stigma in our community for years, right? You know what I mean? But it was never the word mental health. That's just my crazy. That's my crazy.
Nobody wants to talk about it. It's all in the room. The elephant is in the room.
The elephant is in the room.
Nobody want to talk about it.
Yeah, nobody want to talk about it. And I remember, that's just my crazy uncle. Right? But not realizing, like he was suffering from mental health. And to be honest with you, as I started really getting deep into this campaign, I realized that I haven't healed from that mental health illness of being shot, right? The PTSD. I haven't really overcome it, right? I suppressed it a lot. I swept it under the bed, and now that I'm running for election, guess what? I had to move that bed, and I realized all of that stuff is still under there, right? But I was able to mask it better than other people were, right? And I was, so when we talk about mental health, that's a big issue, right? And that's a big issue in our community, and that's a big issue with Black men. And I'm still dealing with that, right? And I'm still having, issues dealing with it, right? And I think it's important that I tell people now, the only way that we're going to cure this mental health issue is to make mental health being cool, right? Because you know what I mean? It's just like, what can we do to make people say, you know what? I need to go speak to a therapist. We got to make that cool. Yeah. We got to make that like, I ain't going on a date tonight. I'm going to speak to my therapist. That's my date. Absolutely. Right. And the reason why I say that is because we got to change the narrative on the way that we think, right? Because mental health is an issue in our whole community, right? And it deals with food insecurity. It deals with voter suppression. It deals with men not treating women correctly. It deals with men not being a part of their kids' lives, their sons' lives, their daughters' lives. So all of that stuff is mental health issues when we really get down to the root of it, right? And me, I could talk about this all day, but I just want to just say, like, we gotta start making mental health issues, something that we should be talking about, like on a daily in the barbershop, and having those peer one-on-one conversations with each other.
And to add with your point, and it's okay when you talk about it. A lot of people want to talk about it, but feel like they're less of a man or less masculine, or they don't want to vent or show their feelings. But it is okay, because again, you're helping yourself, and you might be helping someone when you talk about those problems. You know what I mean? And moving forward, man, I wanted to ask you a question. Being a product of your environment, how did you change your perception to be of service? How did you change your perception to be of service? You know what I'm saying? Because obviously you had to change your perception and how you view your environment. Now, because now you're running for this office, you're doing a great thing. And so how did you change your perception? Was it leaving the people that you hung around? Was it finding who your purpose? How did you change your perception to start doing more positive things for the community?
I think that's an amazing question, and I have never been asked that question, and I thank you for that, because when you were saying it, I was just like, oh wow. But I think it's two things, right? I think it's a conversation about purpose, right? And I think it's a conversation about will, and I think it was a conversation about God, right? Because all of those things played a huge part on it, right? Because Here's the deal. God saved my life.
Absolutely.
Right? God said, I ain't ready for you yet, Bill, because you got some work to do. God didn't let me be paralyzed, right? So he gave me the opportunity to do so many other things, right? So God and purpose was a driving force to it, right? And then the final thing is the will. Like my will was I wanted to do better. I wanted to be that leader that, God wanted me to be. Right. So it took some time and it's a work in progress. But I just think it was just the will to want to be a better man and be a better person. Right. And, once we start realizing that, and it's just like, OK, I'm going to give you your life back.
Right.
Right. So me getting shot, back, arm, leg, stomach, chest, with all of that stuff, I was supposed to be dead. Right. So I'm going to give you a purpose. And you need to use that purpose the right way. I ain't gonna tell you what the purpose is. You're gonna have to figure it out. But part of it is gonna be service.
Right.
Right. You know what I mean? And it's funny, but when you think about it, and I'm gonna challenge you to do this, and it may sound different from this conversation that we have, but when you start looking at your 5 love languages, right? One of my 5 love languages is act of service. Right. So when you encompass that and you bring that all together, it's just like, I always want to be a service to others. Right. So that was, those are some of the things that helped me with it.
I'm gonna have to write that down. I ain't know you're gonna give me Jews. You're gonna give me Jews too. I'm gonna have to write that down and moving forward. One of your active services with basketball. I see you big in basketball. You have a youth program that's going on. It's an amazing. I want you to talk about that program and just talk about how it all started. Matter of fact, just talk about your love for basketball in general.
So my love for basketball started when I was a kid, right? Growing up and in our community, sports was our outlet, right? Basketball was our outlet, and New York City is the mecca of basketball.
Yeah.
Right. So if you
I gotta get to New York, bro. I promise you.
Right. You got to get to New York.
My wife been to New York, and I ain't even been to New York, so I got to get there.
Oh man, you don't say that out loud. Nah, but basketball has always been, a part of my life, and I played basketball when I was young. I played basketball in high school. I grew up with the best New York City ball players that there is. And, anyone that came out of New York City that played this game of basketball, I was able to touch, in some type of way. I've been involved with them all from a business standpoint or maybe from coaching standpoint, but I have been a part of that. So, me growing up playing basketball, it was just like what made me, feel that void of emptiness, right? And, always kept me busy when I was younger until things changed. And then once things changed, it became a second nature to me, right? But when you think about it, and the story's gonna come 100 circles around. So it was just like my enjoyment as a youth when I was growing up was basketball, right? Until I realized that I needed to make some money, then it became something totally different, right? It was like, okay, basketball becomes second.
Yeah. So, I don't mean to cut you off. You was one of your things you was talking about, like the other side of basketball, And,
that's why. We get right into that. So, with basketball, it was just like my outlet. That's all I loved. The only thing I wanted to do was play basketball. And then, when I got turned on to the street life, it was like, okay, well, I want to do this. Like, I can do basketball later, but I ain't going pro. I ain't that good, but so let me figure it out.
Right.
And, then years later I got shot. Right. And what took me back, it was just like, then I went back to basketball. Right. Because now I found my love.
Right.
And my passion again. So I went back to basketball, and then I started coaching. And when I started coaching, I thought that I was saving all these young kids' lives and I was doing all that stuff, but I didn't realize that they were saving my life, right? So everything that I say goes back to purpose,
Right.
Right. So now it was just like, okay, basketball is my love. And it was like, wow, I'm amazing coach. Like, I don't, have my hands on so many young NBA players now
Right.
that came out of my umbrella. So it was just like, what? This is my purpose, God. Like, let me live in my purpose. And basketball gave me the opportunity to travel around the world, travel around the country, meet different people.
Wow.
I was fortunate to, produce a documentary film called Little Ballers.
You with Amari Stoudemire.
Yeah, partnered up with Amari Stoudemire, Lupe Fiasco,
wow.
Crystal McGuire to produce this documentary film of youth basketball for Nickelodeon, which was nominated for NAACP award. And then, I had the opportunity to work with Skylar Diggins. We produced the second Little Ballers that aired on Nickelodeon. So basketball has always been, my go-to. I created programs and started basketball programs and, did all of that stuff when it came down to sports. And then I realized, like, having a conversation with Roland Martin, who was in my film, Little Ballers, he helped me. But he gave me the idea to start this organization that was called Council Him. My last name is Council, right? So the premise of Council Him was so many young men in our community aspire to be two things, rappers and ball players. That's all they see. Yeah. But for me, with Council Him, I wanted to have this mentoring program where that these young people see the other side of the business, right? So when you look at it, basketball has a lifespan of 5 to 10 years, right? I wanted my young people to have an span of 50 years, right? So instead of a 5-year plan, 7-year plan, we're going to have a 50-year plan, right? So now, I pair them up with executives in sports and entertainment that look just like them, right? So maybe you'll have the vice president of development services for the Knicks, right? You know what I mean? That's a young Black dude that look just like them, that dress like them, that you look on social media, they have 8 followers compared to a person who's already in the league and has 100 million followers, but his 5th year, his money is all depleted. But this young guy who's, running the organization, know what I mean, is 50 million in the bank, right? So it's just to change the mindset and the narrative of how we look at ourselves as athletes and entertainers.
Right. And I know that as following you, you always say your platform are solution based. And I think that ties into part of you running for office because you're about solution. You're about finding the problems. What are some? Because I'm gonna tell you, in our community, in the Black community, it's kind of the same everywhere. Whether you're in New York, Atlanta, it might be more, but as far as the poverty and the need for certain things, it's pretty much the same everywhere. So, from your perspective, what are some of the needs in the Black community? Before we get to the topic of why we need to vote, what are some of the needs in the Black community that you look at and say, okay, this is why I'm here. This is what I need to fix.
One of the things is when I say it, and it's a broad scope, it's education. And then let me break that down to you further, right? So people can understand, right? Education, when I say education, is having the information and being informed, right? That's education to me, right? We have the school-based stuff and all of that stuff. Yes, it is, right? But when you're not informed, you just go with anything, right? When you're not knowledgeable of something, you just fall for anything, right? So it's just like when we don't educate ourselves on certain things, we become the victim, right? And it's like, how long are we going to continue to say, we are the victim, right? So it's like anything else. Like, don't give me a pity party. Don't show me you have money. Show me how to make the money. Right. Show me how to reinvest back in our community. So if you look at, all of our communities, right, people of the other color, they want to come to our community because we have the cheap land and we sell it to them quickly, right? Because we believe.
Right. be very successful, whether it be the gas stations, the various businesses they put in our community, and be highly successful. I ain't going to cut you off, but go ahead. I know you.
No, but but you're right. You're 100% right. So when we talk about education, that's what I'm talking about. Like when we talking about, the issues in our community, it comes from education and it comes from a lack of mental health services, right? Because a lot of the stuff that's in our community becomes mental health issues, right? When we talk about pollution and loitering, you know what? We been conditioned in our mind that we are less than others, right? So we treat our community and ourselves less than others, right? Our mentality has to change, right? We have the flyest clothes on and have no money in our pockets.
Yes.
Right? Because we believe that what we have on dictates who we are as individuals, right? That again goes back to a lack of education, right? Because then that goes back to a lack of self-esteem, right? And all of that stuff, we grew up not having self-esteem, right? So this is what I'm talking about. Information based will help us become better people and will help us realize like, oh, snap. And I'm gonna give you a prime example. Here in Harlem, growing up, being in the streets, there was times when these abandoned buildings was going on sale for $1, right? But lack of education didn't afford us to know how that it didn't cost $1. We had to still get the money from the bank.
Right.
We have to fix the money up. We have to fix the property up, right? Lack of education, a lack of information, right? So now we take what we have, what we know now, and you give us a place like Harlem in the early 80s when there was abandoned buildings, right? We will be the Black Wall Street all over again because now we're informational based now, and we can find solutions to get things, right? So I always say the issues in our community becomes the lack of opportunity and the lack of education.
And I want to say something to that because, education changed the conversation and association brings on similarities as well. And a lot of I say Black men or women who are successful will start charging for information. They shouldn't do that. We're not, as a Black community, successful enough to be charging another Black person for valuable information. We should be helping one another cold-heartedly because we know we're behind when it comes to the financial dollar. So we got to really.
But you know what?
Go ahead.
Not to cut you off. Guess where that comes from? Right? Slavery suppression.
Right.
Right. So you got to think about it. Remember how they used to say the house in person was better than the field in person.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So now we just change words now. Right. The person with all the information is better than the person without the information. And sometimes we don't want to share that.
Yeah. We don't want.
So it's
We do, and that's the problem that we have to fix because it's okay because a lot of times I feel like once a brother is successful, this person don't want to tell this brother because he feel like this person might take his spot, and it shouldn't be like that. It should be all love because again we all are trying to accomplish the same thing. Let's become successful and get our 50 acres and move it right.
Yeah.
But see, I'm moving right forward. We're gonna move into this because I want to talk about the 3 P's to provide, prevent, and protect because that's something you said on one of your podcasts, and I'm very interested in listening to that in detail because I want my viewers to know about that.
So I call it the 3 P's: provide, prevent, and protect. Right? And coming from a city council perspective, that is your job, right? Any elected official, right? You need to provide programming and resources for your community, right? You need to prevent things from happening in your community because you don't have those fundamental principles of programming, education, job opportunities, and food security, right? And protect, provide, prevent, and prevent. Which ones did I get? I did provide.
You got provide, prevent, and protect.
Okay. So which ones did I do already?
I think you did all. I think you did all. I think you went back. I can't remember.
Okay. I think I probably went back. But one of the other things that I want to do is talk about protect, right?
Yeah.
We need to protect our community, you know, our women in our community, our children in our community, our elders in our community, right? We need to make sure that we protect them and give them all the resources and opportunities and the help that they need. So those three things are important. And if you have anyone that becomes an elected official, you know, you need to figure out those 3 Ps, right? And if those 3 Ps that person is not doing, then you guys have the wrong person in your community.
Exactly. And that's what I want to get onto as far as in the Black community when we vote. Voting is the discussion is topic, and that's why I brought you here, because it's important to talk about voting in the Black community, because we have to. But what you said, we have to figure out who these people is. Being informed about who you voting for is essential. Because we can't just on an election day, okay, I'm finna go ahead and pick my guy. He's Black. We're gonna pick him. He might not be for you, but we can look at you. Let's take you. We look at you. We see your groundwork. You in the streets. You are Harlem. We can see that you putting in, and you see you worthy of your vote. And that's what I want people to understand. And where I'm from, like, hey, listen, I don't mind voting, but I need to know some history. Who your friends are, who they with, who they hang around, what have they done for the Black community? Just because you're a Democrat or whatever doesn't mean, or just because you at the cookout doesn't mean, you know, I'm voting for you. What have you done? I need to see your actions.
Right. So, you know, it's interesting, right? Because I have been on this campaign trail for the last 8 months. And, you know, I have been the one that probably is the most popular person in this race when it comes down to popularity in our community.
Right.
But when you look at it, I'm the popular one with the non-voters, right? Because we're not voting. Right. And the reason why we're not voting, it goes back to my main principle, a lack of education and lack of knowledge and a lack of being informed, right? So when you look at me, so look at my community, right? So there is District 9 is comprised of 160,000 people in District 9, right? So in 2017, there was a special election in 2017. The current person who has the seat now won that election with only 4,000 votes, right? So that is less than, if you look at it, that is less than 3% of our voters who came out to vote. Yes. So when we talk about your local elections, and I don't really know the terminology that you guys may have in South Carolina, but I think it's a lack of education and information that's given to our community, right? Because, you know, we come out in ways for our governor. We come out in ways for our president, but realizing that they don't affect our day-to-day lives. The person who affects your day-to-day lives is your local election, right? Someone like your city council person, right? Because me in District 9 in Harlem, what I do, I'm responsible for the budget, right? I go sit with the mayor and say, this is what my community needs. I'm fighting for $200 million for my community, right? And then that goes into programming, that goes into safety, that goes into education, that goes into after school programs, that goes into garbage cans, that goes into make sure that we have lights on the darkest corners in the community where there's a high volume of crime, right? So I get a chance to sit and fight and say, no, this is what my community needs, right? And having a conversation with you, because you're the mayor, like, listen, this is what we need to do for this particular community, right? We need more after school programs. I need another $50 million so I can put into cure violence program so we can help, combat the gun violence that's happening in our schools. Right. That's your city council person. That's not your mayor or your president, right? Yes, we are responsible for legislation and writing laws and, putting laws into effect. But like I always tell people, what is a law? A law is an idea, right? Hey, I got this idea that my son was choked to death, right? Was choked to death here in New York City. So now I want this law to be passed saying that police officers can't use a certain neck hold choke.
Right.
Okay, that's an idea. That's a thought. Let's get that passed, right? And let's push that law. So now we have an Eric Garner law here in New York City, right? So you see how things happen, but the person who starts that is your local officials. Those are the ones who push those laws and push those laws and push those laws until they get signed and they get passed.
Absolutely, absolutely. So now we have this information. How can we, like, my question is for those who are not voting in your community, what are you doing, or what are some of the tactics you're doing to get those people to wake up and say, hey, we got to get the voters in. We got to get the votes in. What are some of the strategies what did it take for us to wake up and say, hey, we got to get out there. I don't care how long the lines is. I don't care what strategy it takes for them to kind of not let us vote. We're going to sit here and make sure it happens. Because I'm going to tell you what happened to me down here one time. I had moved, and I had to change my voter registration card. And I had to go down here, but I did it. I had to go meet with this people. I knew what the distraction was. They didn't really want me to vote, but I still got it done. And sometimes people get discouraged. And I've seen a lot of people was in the weight room as I was at, they just walked away because they got discouraged. We have to make sure whatever it takes to get your vote in, you got to get your vote in. Because I know it varies as far as difficult in different areas, but you know how it is down here in the South. So, you know what I mean? So it's very difficult sometimes, but you got to stay motivated because guys like you, we got to get in. So my question to you is, what are some of the things you're doing to keep your community motivated to get out the votes they can and get in?
Well, it's weird, and this, dealing with our community, it's always, sometimes we become followers, right? We whoever's doing it, well, they cool, let me follow them. And, so for me, one of the things I have been doing is just tapping into people with voices and platforms, right? Like yourself, and explaining to people how important it is. And then, letting people look at me as an example, right? So they're not inviting me to a table. So what I'm doing, I'm bringing my own table, my own chair, my own menu, right? And you know what? And then I'm bringing my own cook so he can cook what I'm gonna order off my own menu, right? Because there is times, and still in our community, you said this earlier, we don't stick together, so I'm getting, I'm not a part of any political machine here in New York City and Harlem, right? So it's just like, and that's been guarded by older gatekeepers, right? Who for their own reasons, right? Sitting there, right? And that's not just here in Harlem, that's all over, right? When you look at some of the Black leaders in your community, they're probably older and they're stuck in their ways. So what I'm doing is just like going to my guys on the street, like, listen, if you want to change the jail reform, right? I'm the person that you need to have this conversation with. If you want to start a business, I'm that person that you're going to have this conversation with. If you're going to, want, your kids to go to different schools and, have the quality of education, I'm the person. So you can't sit there and say what the problem is if you're not a part of the solution. So if you're not trying to be the solution, and how can I be the solution, Bill? Get your behind to the poll and vote.
Absolutely.
It's not, it's not doing it. It's not not doing anything for you, because you won't never know if you don't go. Right. So now if you vote for me and I win, guess what? Your vote counted. Even if I lose, your vote counted. Right. So use it. Right. And you think about it, our ancestors fought so hard. Right. So I'm working on something now when we're talking about voter suppression and how hard it was for us to have the basic human rights that we have now, to ride on a damn bus, right? And you can sit wherever you want to sit, right? You know what I mean? To be able to go to whatever school that you want to go to learn, right? To not be able to, go into a store because a white person goes into the store. Like our families as ancestors died for us to be able to vote. So you're doing all of us a disservice when you're not. And the thing about it is, it's simple. I'm not asking you to cut your leg off, right? I'm not asking you to, you know what I mean, to cut your finger off. Right. I'm asking you to go to a poll, click 3 names that you know, right? And hit that lever and then walk out. It's simple, right? We make it so hard on ourselves because we do not want to fight for what we deserve, right? We want people to feel bad for us and give us handouts. Fuck, excuse my language, the hell with the handouts right now. I'm coming to take what's mine.
Right. Absolutely.
So it's 2 types of people in the world. Either the person that's not going for it or the person that's going to go for it. And I'm just that person. I'm going to go for it. Right. Win, lose, draw, whatever. I'm going to go for it.
Yes, we always have to challenge and push ourselves. And I think a lot of our community, I would tell all the time, we have to take our hard-earned money and make sure we're putting it back into these Black businesses as well. And then once we do that and channel that energy, then the voter becomes much more clearer because you now know how to be loved because you love yourself financially. A lot of times we'll take our hard-earned money and continue to give it out to other various places, like talking about the sneakers and the fancy cars, and not putting it back in our pockets and let it generate, because we have to generate our own flow. And I think once you do that, we'll become more of an asset to those, and they be like, okay, they got it now. Now they become a real threat because now they
let me give you some numbers. And you're gonna this probably blow your mind. And I'm just going to use New York City. And the numbers are probably a little bit different. But in here in Harlem, the dollar stays in the Black community for 6 hours. Wow. Okay, so follow me now. It stays in the Black community for 6 hours.
Right.
Stays in the white community for 17 days. Stays in the Jewish community for 22 days. Stays in the Asian community for 32 days. Right? When you look at all of this stuff, Black folks don't have businesses in Chinatown. We don't have business in the Jewish communities. We don't have, businesses in a lot of the white communities, right? But they all have businesses in our community. How many times we order Chinese food, right? But we don't see Chinese food
everywhere.
Exactly. Great wall everywhere, right? They everywhere, right? They everywhere. So you see, but here's the other piece too. How many of them, and nothing against my Asian community and my Asian family, none of that stuff, but it's just numbers, right? Numbers don't lie about it, right?
It's true.
They don't put back into our community, right? And then they don't spend none of their money with us.
No.
So they're taking from our community and not giving back, right? But on the other hand, it's just like, oh, no, I'm not going to go to that soul food restaurant across the street because it's too fattening and I don't want to get fat.
Right.
But I can go to the Chinese food and get processed broccoli.
Exactly.
What's the difference, right? You see what I'm saying? So again.
Yes. You're absolutely right. I think we have to wrap our hands around it. I think it's about maintaining a level of support. And it's okay that you might not like this particular place, but you ain't gotta go on your Instagram or Facebook and like, oh man, I hate such and such places. This. When McDonald's done messed up on your order 39
times and you keep going back.
You take your kids back. What's the difference? Like, you know what I'm saying? Support. And I think once we get past that, and again, like back to what you was talking about, making sure you're very informative about your vote. You see what I'm saying? You got to know a person's history when it comes to people like yourself, because obviously I'm not from New York, but you from Harlem. You're born and raised in Harlem. I done studied you the last 2 days. You can tell that you mean well for your community in District 9, and that's what we need, people in South Carolina. And from my area, I need to see you care about District 9. I need to see your footwork. I need to see the bottom of your sneakers. I want to see if you're out here. I look on your Instagram posts, you're working with kids, you're dealing with different things, and I want to give you your flowers, brother, because we need more and more people like you. And if we get more and more people like you, I think we'll move in the right direction for real.
I appreciate you for saying that, brother. It means a lot, man. I appreciate that.
For real. That's why I reached out and grabbed you, man. And I'm thank you for the information you was able to provide for me on my platform, man. And before I let you go, because I know you're a busy man. You probably precious time. Is there anything you want to tell the community, or anything you want to tell my viewers, man, moving forward, man, and just a positive information, because I do love to give out positive vibes, positive energy, man.
One of the things that I just want to say, and I say this to everyone, I say this to my young people, who listen to you or whatever. Don't let people tell you you are the future, right? You're the right now, right? And you show up right now and you show out, right? To my Black men, like, it's up to us, right? We need to take our rightfully place, in the head of our communities and lead our communities. Our women, we've been, laying on their shoulders a little bit too long, right? It's time for us to stand up and let them lay on our shoulders, right? We have strong, independent women in our community that we need to uplift, and we need to protect, we need to provide, and we need to prevent anything from happening to them. You know what I mean? So, and then when it comes down to this voting thing, come to the table, right? Come to the table, even if you don't know, right? Learn the information, get the information. We got Google now, so we can find out so much stuff, and we can go into these rooms and be well informed, right? And I'll tell anybody, I'm not a politician. I'm not even, some of the stuff I don't know, right? But it's not going to make me uncomfortable to learn it, right? And we just have to learn how to be uncomfortable
and be in a room,
and be in that room, right?
With people. I'm glad you make sure you say this. Don't be uncomfortable when you know you're calling and you know who you are. Never be afraid to be in that room and ask questions.
Yeah, like I tell you, the funny thing is, and I'm just gonna leave this on this note. I was the most uncomfortable person, there is, and I didn't realize until somebody else told me, who's in the political space, like, you make all of them uncomfortable, right? So I walked in a place trying to fit into their shoes because this was their sandbox, but realizing that they was afraid that I was going to disrupt everything that's in their sandbox. So always stay true to who you are and walk in that room, whether you walk in that room with a hat, sweatshirt like me. And if you ever watch me, like, I can put the suit on too, but a lot of times I'm like, yo, I'm who I am. And you guys going to accept me from who I am, right? Because I got a whole bunch of people who are just like me who want to be in this role. And once I start leading that army, they're going to follow, because I'm going to let them take over. Right. So it's just like, we just got to keep pushing each other, man, and keep God first and keep doing the work of your purpose.
That's what it is, man. That's what it is, man. Look, Billy Council, man. Listen, I'm from Greenwood, South Carolina, man. If you ever come down this way, man, you got Black media on your side. If you ever need things, look me up. You know how I get in touch with me. It's your boy,
absolutely,
aka the voice box of the block, and we out. Peace, brother.
Peace.
It don't matter the topic, whatever it is, then you know that we got you. We spread all the knowledge, we talk about politics, even the gossip. You can hear us on Spotify or tune in to YouTube, you even can watch us. I know we got haters, I can promise you one thing, that we never stopping. It's the Good Guy Podcast. I ain't bragging, but we are the greatest. It's the Good Guy Podcast.